All right.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone.
Oh, wait a second. Wait a second.
Okay, so people,
I
welcome.
want to see what my arrows.
We're going to get started.
How will let's see. How do I get back?
So just hit
Okay.
the back button on your keyboard. So, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Alex Kalzareth, and I'm the director of the German Research Division at JewishGen. I'm filling in for Avrami Grohl, our executive director. Today's talk is part of our ongoing talk series of educational webinars, and will focus on Landsmanshaftn, what they were and what we can learn from them. Our speaker is Avraham Kraus, who is a veteran educator and genealogist specializing in uniquely Jewish resources. He's a frequent presenter for Jewish genealogical societies and at conferences, and we feel privileged that he's joining us today. A few notes before we begin. The session is being recorded and will be made available via JewishGen's YouTube channel. We will send a link via email when the video is live. If you would like to ask questions, we will try to get to them at the end. Please post in the Q&A on the bottom of the screen. And please don't post them in the chat. You can use the chat to connect with each other, share similar experiences, etc. The closed captioning will be enabled and should appear at the bottom of your screens. So now, without further ado, I pass it over to Avraham.
Thank you, Alex. And welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all across the globe to Introduction to Landsmanshaftn. I'm very excited to be here tonight. And before I begin, I would like to thank JewishGen and Avrami Grohl. I'm a bit not upset. I wish I could have given it to him in person, but I would like to thank him on behalf of myself and everyone for providing us this venue. I also want to thank Alex for filling in for Avrami. So let us just begin. This is a global topic, and I'm happy to just whet everyone's appetite. I hope it's an introduction, so there's a lot to talk about. So let's just start from the beginning. You may be wondering, some of you probably know, I'm sure a lot of you know what a Landsmanshaft is, but there may be people out there who do not. So for the benefit of those who have not heard or are not clear about what a Landsmanshaft is, we will define that. And we will also tonight speak about why Landsmanshaftn are important. Also, we want to speak about what did it do. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble here with and what will I find and how to find it. Okay, so what is a Landsmanshaft? A Landsmanshaft is a society formed by Jewish immigrants from the same villages, towns, and cities, primarily in Eastern Europe. This is a definition that is given at this on the page for Center for Jewish History in New York. But it's a pretty concise definition and gives you just a general idea of what these societies are about. Jewish immigrants, same place, and they band together when they were when they left their towns, so they wanted to be together, and they helped each other, and we'll speak more about that. So that's a general definition, but to really know what the Landsmanshaft did, we want to speak about why it's important. Well, just think about a tree. When we do a Jewish genealogy or any genealogy, we talk about our family tree. But a family tree is the bare bones of a tree. It's only the branches. It's dates and facts. Very little about facts. It's just who the person, his maybe a birth date, and that's about it for a genealogy. But when we talk about family history, that's when we get all the details. And when we talk about where people are from, the ancestral homes, those are the details that we want to put on our tree. So Landsmanshaftn is really an extension of your ancestral town research, because what happened was that ancestral towns basically sent their representatives across the globe, or they didn't send them necessarily. People went on their own volition, but it's the people continued their lives, but they didn't leave their shtetl necessarily. They left it physically, but they were still part of their shtetl was still a part of their identity. So that's what we're trying to add to the tree, and make it with all the delicious fruit and foliage. Landsmanshaftn is basically bridging two worlds. When immigrants came to a foreign country, they were very, very like a fish out of water. You were talking about people that didn't know the language. They felt very very uncomfortable. They everything was new. They left their friends and relatives back at home, and they were embarking in a new life. And it's a very, very scary situation. It's something which took a lot of courage and took a lot of perseverance. And the Landsmanshaft basically was able to create a situation where people felt at home in their new home. So and if we really let's speak about what the Landsmanshaft really did, and then we'll have a better idea of understanding what the Landsmanshaftn what we're all about. Okay, the first thing that Landsmanshaftn did was there was a acculturation process that went on when the immigrants came to the new country, like we spoke about. They actually, it was like a sort of a tug of war type of thing. They had a conflict, because on the one hand, they wanted to become American, or wherever country they went to. They wanted to adapt to their new setting. On the other hand, they wanted to be most people, to say different degrees, wanted to maintain their identity. They felt comfortable with their identity. So the amount of adaptation that they needed would depend on how much they were looking for, and how they would go about it. The Landsmanshaft was really a ideal place. It's a place where they had people from the same place. They spoke the same language. They spoke Yiddish. They had the same personal experiences, and they had the same history. They knew this. They knew the same people, and it made it easier for them to adapt to their new setting. The next thing that they provided was social services, especially in a time when this was before government assistance programs. So people relied on their organizations, on their people that knew them, to help them out. They also provided relief and reunited people. Relief meant they provided assistance to their compatriots at home, in the ancestral home. They also were involved after the Holocaust in remembrance, and they also reestablished their ancestral towns. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about acculturation. This like when the immigrants met on their brethren on the other side of the ocean. So they, like we said, there was a language barrier, not between them, but between them and their new country. So they many times landsmen, which are people from their same town, they met them at the boat, sometimes, let's say at Ellis Island, they help them with interpretations and they help them get adjusted. Here is the Bialystoker Synagogue. It's a landmark in the Lower East Side of New York. They provide, so this is one of many synagogues that are called Landsmanshaft synagogues. The people in the Landsmanshaft, they made their own shuls, they made their own congregations. That's for those who are religious or traditional. That was part of how they made their organization. The terminology chevra and anshe are terminologies. It means a group, or it means people of chesed, means the people of good doings, of Bialystok. That's the name of their shul. That's a giveaway when these are words like chevra and anshe indicate a Landsmanshaft congregation. Another type of organizations that people had, for people who were the arbitering, the people who were for socialists and Yiddishists, they would often belong to this organization. And there you would use the term, if you saw a Landsmanshaft that had the initials WC, that stands for Workmen's Circle. Another group is International Workers' Order. These were communists, a break off from the arbitering. And they're, again, abbreviations you'll find with the names of the towns, IWO. Another group is Labor Zionists, or the Farband. They're the National Jewish National Workers Alliance, and it's abbreviated JNWA. Another thing that Landsmanshaftn did was they helped their constituents become citizens. If you have taken a look at petitions for naturalizations, when you have the people that signed, very often were relatives. The witnesses were relatives or friends. So in case you have you've gone through naturalization records and you see names on the bottom, it's always important to look at them, because they may be relatives, they may be friends, or they may be people from the Landsmanshaft. So it's a good hint to look for these people, to spread your net and try to find out who these people were. Okay. Social services or benefits. What types of benefits did Landsmanshaftn provide? They provided them work benefits, health, and death. They had work compensation benefits. So if people looked for jobs, they helped people look for jobs. They help people who are who let's say someone lost a close relative and they had to sit shiva. They helped give a stipend to the wife and children. They were involved sometimes with like I said, finding jobs or making a network, like making connections for people for work opportunities. Another thing they did is some, like the Bialystoker, or one of their organizations, created a home for the aged. They took care of the old and infirm. Some had hospitals. This was a hospital, Har Moriah Hospital in New York, which doesn't exist anymore. It was started by the Federation of Galicians and Bukoviners, and that, like I say, that was another endeavor that some Landsmanshaftn took. But the main thing that Landsmanshaftn was known for was for burials and cemetery plots. These are I mean, it's a permanent record, actually, and a good place to look to it's a must for investigating Landsmanshaftn, to go into the cemeteries, look at the gates. It has the names of officers. It sometimes has members' names there. You could find people in the cemetery itself who probably you didn't even know were relatives. And it's very important to do a thorough job in researching cemetery plots. Another thing they did was relief and reuniting people. What was that about? One thing was overseas aid. There are some certain organizations, such as the Valachi Aid Association from Lynn, Massachusetts. They were started around the time of World War One, and in the period of World War One and prior to it, there was a very really a decimation of the kehilot, of the communities in Eastern Europe. It's overshadowed by the Holocaust, but it's nonetheless it's something that we need to be aware of, that there was a lot of destruction and terrible atrocities occurred during that period. And the people that stayed behind in Europe would rely on the help of their brethren that were in better situations in the different countries outside of in the diaspora. In this Great War period, there were a lot of fires and things of that sort. There was a fire in the town of Valachi, and in particular, and homes were destroyed, and poor orphans needed help. Here's a list that you find in the Landsmanshaft records of the poor orphans, and the amount of money is listed, how much money was allotted to these families. You have the names, and it gives you sometimes a little bit of description of, and sometimes the people were from different towns. It tells you different places, so it gives you clues. I circled here, these were just, this is in Yiddish, but I circled family names of people that I need to research, because they are a family name of mine, Kapelovich. That's for World War One. World War II also had relief efforts. This is dated, as you can see, 1946. So this was a emergency convention by Suwałk and vicinity Landsmanshaft. Suwałk is a town and a province in northern Poland, and they had here a relief program, and you could see on the left all the different cities that are represented in New York, Chicago, Detroit, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Dallas. And these were they had representatives across the United States, and as we shall see, they had in not only in the United States, but you have here from Buenos Aires, Argentina, Montevideo, Uruguay, and Tel Aviv, then Palestine. It was before the creation of the state. And these were people that were these were organizations that were all involved with helping the survivors of the Holocaust. Now, it's important to not only look at these things and see how benevolent they were, but it also gives you the clues. If you're from the town, let's say of Suwałk, this is very important to get a hold of this information, because this will lead you to places where you may not think of looking for relatives. If you're from Suwałki, and you may not have known that you have relatives perhaps in these South American countries or in Israel. There are also Landsmanshaftn were involved with reparations. Here, this is one of my societies, Przemysl, in Poland, and this is a letter here, and asking for, telling about the situation and the destruction, and they were looking for reparations. This is from the Joint Distribution Committee. It was known then as AJDC. Today it's known as JDC, or the Joint. Here we have a letter that was sent to the Landsmanshaft, the Kosov Laker Landsmanshaft, by the Landsmanshaftn department. of the joint. This is trying to they were involved with reuniting this boy Velvela Meidenberg with his family. And without going into the whole thing right now, although I would like to spend time on this, if we have time, then we shall go into it. But this just gives you an idea of some of the things that they were involved with. So, in essence, what Landsmanshaftn did, they bridged worlds. They bridged worlds for the people who came. Excuse me. They were a bridge to make it such that the immigrants could sort of have one foot on one side of the ocean and in the other side as well. They helped the people back home. They had the connection. They didn't burn their bridge behind them. They kept the ties, and they were able to help. And they were helped in the sense that not only did they have support and love from the people that got the support from them, but they also, at least before the Holocaust, there was a two-way street going, and some people actually even went home. But at least they had the fond memories, and until unfortunately the Holocaust, when everything was destroyed. Now they were also involved with remembrance, and that is how they memorialize their towns. There are a number of institutions and museums. We'll speak now about in Israel. There's chamber. One of the earliest ones is the Chamber of the Holocaust in Jerusalem, where there are plaques. They were called virtual plaques. Virtual had a different meaning before the internet, but these were plaques that are not actually tombstones, but they're made to look like tombstones, and they have the names of towns and the Landsmanshaftn that were involved with memorializing their towns. This is the Valley of Destroyed Communities of Yad Vashem, and there are also ways of memorializing the towns of Europe. Here's a Polish Jewry memorial forest in Nataf, Israel, where you also have plaques with town names. And you have similar things in the United States and other countries where you have monuments and to the honor of the towns. Here is, and of course, the memorial that we speak, especially as genealogists, that we look to get information, and that's the memorial books, the Yizkor books, where it has a lot of information about the town besides the memorializing the town itself. And Landsmanshaftn were also involved with reestablishing their towns, if that could be done. How did they do that? They did that primarily by support of Israel. Here's the Israeli bond for the state of Israel. They were involved with Landsmanshaftn. There was a program that Landsmanshaftn was involved with the United Israel Appeal, which eventually became the United Jewish Appeal, the UJA. And that was an emergency housing fund program for recent immigrants, where particularly for, I think, the Russian immigrants, and the government got the Landsmanshaftn involved with supporting this effort, helping them. This is the Kiryat Bialystoker. This is actually a town, a recreation, so to speak, of Bialystoker in Israel. In the town of Yehud, Israel, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, there's this little enclave which is called Kiryat Bialystoker. It's named after Bialystoker, and I was there a few years back with Mark Halpern, was leading a visit there at the Jerusalem conference a few years back. It was very, very enjoyable and a very great experience, as we met even some people from Bialystoker. So for those people who ask, are there any Landsmanshaftn around, or is there any vestige of memory of a shtetl? Well, it depends where you're from. If you were fortunate enough to be from Bialystok, then this is a definite must on your itinerary when you come to Israel. And if you didn't have relatives from Bialystok, well, then next time around, make sure you do. Okay. Now, this is in that same village. This is the Bialystoker Synagogue. So now we saw the one in New York, and now this is the one in Israel. And there is a hall of Bialystok on the grounds there, which is actually like a museum, and it's a place to do research. And I encourage everyone to see that. Okay. So what will I find? Sorry. And how do I find it? The place that we go to first is the Evo Lonsmanshaft Collection. The Evo Lonsmanshaft Collection is the first place I would suggest for anyone to look for records for Landsmanshaftn. It's located in New York, and it has approximately, well, at the time that they gave the information, 1,380 organizations. It is more than that. The true number of actually organizations that were in New York vary. No one really knows the exact number. There were maybe somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 organizations. Some say 10,000. I mean, I think that's a little bit exaggerated. I don't know, but there were a lot, but not everyone left behind records. They probably did keep records, but we don't have them. Those organizations that had the foresight to preserve their records sent them very often to Evo in New York. And actually, not only from New York organizations, that spanned the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, Israel. There are some records, not a lot, but there are from around the globe. So it's always, that's why I say it's worth it to look, because they represent Landsmanshaftn all over. Now, they also it's also important because it's not even if you didn't have any relatives that came to New York, but the towns that you're from, there's the great chance that the New York being the metropolitan, the greatest metropolis of the times of Jewish population at the turn of the century and turn of the 20th century, that is, New York had the most Jews. So you're best to look there to see if your shtetl or your town has representation, and there's a good chance that there is, and if not your town, then the neighboring town. So what types of records could you find there? These are organizational records. When we say organizational records, these were the minutes that were taken. Here, this particular example here is in Yiddish. Many were in Yiddish or English, maybe other languages, but the majority were either in Yiddish or English. Some of them were both. They started off Yiddish, and then as the immigrants became more comfortable in their new language, that it would go to English. You can find the Constitution and bylaws of the organization, when it's organized, when it was incorporated. You could find the officers and founders, their names, pictures sometimes. You could find pictures sometimes of a spouse. A lot of times, some societies were men only, and some societies were women only, and some societies were mixed. But sometimes we usually have a lack of sources for our women population, and Landsmanshaftn records are a good place to look for things about women, because sometimes they're not represented in other records, but here many times you will find them. Here are membership lists with address and phone numbers. Here's a dues ledger. This is a very interesting dues ledger. It says here, up in the top corner, left-hand corner, it says, it's written in Yiddish, this man, Samuel Kapelau, it mentions he's the son of Hinda Elka. So you're getting already 2 generations, and you even get a third. It says when he was deceased, which is information that you may not have otherwise, but it gives you the 3rd generation here, the son of Sam, and that is Herbert. And it gives you his address, his office, and his home telephone, his office telephone number. And of course, that's not current, but here you have information on 3 generations just from a dues card. You have applications to become a member. You fill out applications. These things are a gold mine of information. They tell you the names. They sometimes tell you the birthday. They tell you where the person was born. Here he's 35 years old, 24th of December in 1890. He was born in Shemishal. Okay, it says his occupation. He's a broom maker. And it tells, et cetera, et cetera. It tells his wife's name, number of children, how their ages, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a medical examiner reports. They didn't want to take people with the existing conditions because they had to pay. A lot of times they had to pay, like we said, work comp if a person is not in good health. So the person could be a liability to the organization. So they made sure, they tried to make sure they had doctors that evaluated whether they were good candidates to become to join the organization. Here you have William Gottfried, who's he's single at the time. Here you have Myra Gottfried, who became the wife of William. And here, if you look, I'm sorry, let me go back. Her maiden name is Greenstein. Now, how did William and Myra get together? I don't know, but I could certainly take some guesses. Look at J.R.I. Poland. I took the name Greenstein, which is written here, Grunstein, and I looked for names to see whether there was a connection between these 2 families. Sometimes people became married, got to know each other from family connections. So sometimes you look in the Landsmanshaft, you could look for names of people who got married if both of them are perhaps members of that society, but before they were married, so their families may have known each other in Europe. So here is a possibility, and I can't tell you it's for sure, but here you have the Gottfried family and the Grunstein families. These are other marriages between people of those surnames. Here are death benefits were awarded, but people had to prove who they are in order for the society to give them the money. Here, this is this Erwin Munt is asking for his benefits, and what does he include with his letter? Death certificate of the deceased that he's collecting for, and showing that that's Nathan and his brother Sheldon, who predeceased him. So he's proving that he's the sole survivor and thus the heir to the money. Here's a marriage certificate that proved the relationship between the wife of the deceased in a different case. And here she included not only her wedding certificate for the authorities, she included the ketubah, And this here is also, of course, a gold mine. It contains the Hebrew names of the person and their father's names. Plus, it also has the maiden name of the mother, of the bride. This is another thing you may find in Landsmanshaft records at Evo, and that is a burial plot map. This will show you the Landsmanshaften who had cemetery plots. They kept a record of the members and where they are buried. So this should be the same copy of this should also exist at the cemetery, but you should be aware that sometimes there are differences. And here you see that there are notations on the side. This is notated, and I doubt that the copy at the cemetery would have these notations. It says, note, there are two Bessie Kaplowitz, one from New York, the other from Texas. So that's some information that could be very helpful when you're looking for people. Okay, so how do we get access to these records? That's a bit of an issue. There's good news and there's bad news. Let's say the bad news is that the Evo records must be consulted on site. They're not on the internet. As we know, not everything good is on the internet, and we can't do all our research on the internet. But the good news is that there are ways, there are indexes, there's preparation, there's a lot of information that you could get online or from other ways. And we're going to go into that a little bit now. Okay, so first of all, this should go without saying, but if a person is looking at for their Landsmanshaft, they have to know where it is. They have to know the exact town, because there are towns that so the names have changed, and there are towns with the same name in different places, and it is like we could say here in Israel, it could be a balagan. It could be very, very confusing and very chaotic. So anyone who's doing Landsmanshaft research has to first determine with 100% certainty that they know where their town is. So I took an example here. This town with the difficult Polish spelling, for those of us who are not fluent in Polish, Mezrich Podlaski. It's the Polish Mezrich town. By the way, it's not the only one in Poland, but it's that. So let's say I want to look for this town. So the place to go to is JewishGen, JewishGen Communities Database. This is if you go put the name of the town of your choice in the box, and you will get the results, hopefully. Here for Mezrich, we find that there are 7 towns by that name. The one that we are interested in for this purpose, for our purposes, is demonstration, is the one that's like we said, the one that's Podlaski. Okay, so now where do we go? We've got our town, and so which direction do we go to? Well, we first go to New York, like we said, to the Evo. And we said the reason was because New York should have records that pertain to all or most of us. But it's not just for New York, like we mentioned before. Keep that in mind. I can't say it enough. Go to Landsmanshaft Collection in Evo. How do we get there? Well, in person, you'd have to go to the Center of Jewish History and on West 16th Street in New York. But fortunately, there are research guides that the center provides, and I would strongly recommend them. So if you and all, by the way, in the handout you have the links to the sites that I'm going to, so you don't have to worry about finding them. Everything should be in my handout. So here you have by the genealogy research research page, and it has a resources here. If you look there, you will see that the Evo Lonsmanshaft Collection and also the AGHS, that's American Jewish Historical Society Incorporation papers, I point to that as another list that you should go through. Those are resources, not the only resources, but those are important resources to look at. But I would not suggest clicking there right at the start. I would first say to go to the research guides to read up about the collections and get tips. If you go here, that takes you to Genealogy Guide, Landsmanshaft Records. And if you click on that, it brings you to this page. There's an introduction. On the left, you'll see the blue bar. There's an introduction, which you're on, the introduction area. There's locating Landsmanshaft records and additional resources. All those should be explored. Okay, so now, how do you get access? The Jewish Genealogical Society of New York is the place to go. This is, by the way, the rule of anywhere. Let's say I'm interested in Chicago, or I'm interested in Detroit, or interested in Los Angeles. Doesn't matter where. If I find that I have a Landsmanshaft, if I locate a Landsmanshaft in any of these towns, one of the first place, if not the first place to go to, is the local Jewish Genealogical Society. So in this case, for Evo, this is the place to go. And you have Landsmanshaft Collection, and for Mezrich, you have number one, Independent Mezricher, you have Mezricher Ladies Society, and you have United Mezricher Relief. 3 different files. This is Bialystoker. We mentioned before, Bialystoker, like I say, is very well represented with 14 files. There's also the Burial Society project that they'll tell you about, and that's always looking for the cemeteries of your Landsmanshaft. So be sure to check that out, and be sure to check out all the other links for the Jewish organizations as well. Okay, and let me mention before, incorporation papers from the American Jewish Historical Society as well. Okay, so now how do I know which towns in let's say the United States or in other countries, in South Africa or in Israel? How do I know where to find my Landsmanshaft? So I look at these three. This is your 3-pronged plan: the Yizkor books, the Kilo links, and nearby communities. Let's go to the Yizkor books. Yizkor books on the page, on your shtetl page that the town finder and JewishGen, you will find a box. If your town has Yizkor books, it will be there on the right-hand side of your town page. And it says here, for our town of Mezrich, it lists 4 different Yizkor books, 2 from Argentina and 2 from Israel. If you see there's a little icon there, the book icon, that means that it's that there's books at New York Public Library where you could find an original copy of those books. But there is one of the books, Sefer Medrash, from the 1978 edition, that has a translation, because if you're aware that JewishGen has a Yizkor book translation project, and this is only one of the books, but you could see from this book, if you look at the table of contents, you go to the bottom, which is very common in Yizkor books, you will find often, not always, but you will find often Landsmanshaft information, where the Jews went after the Holocaust or before, it started before, and where you could find the remnants of your town, meaning in the diaspora. So here, here you have in Argentina, Toronto, and Australia, right from the bat, you see that there are that this town had Landsmanshaft in these places. Obviously, New York would be another place to be there, and there is one here. Just you can't tell from the title, from the citation here of the history of United Mezrich Relief. That is a New York-based organization, but you wouldn't know that unless you actually saw the original. But some books have the translation of the entire book, and this is not the case with Mezrich. So you cannot have a hyperlink and taking you to this section of the book, but there are other sections that it could take you to. But it's important to look at all the other books because you will find information about other towns. You won't necessarily find all information in the translated book. Here's a non-translated book that adds towns: Los Angeles, Montreal, France. So here is the whole list of towns that have societies from Mezrich, and that is gotten from Yizkor books. Notice here that you have from Canada, you have Montreal and Toronto. There is another town, Mezrich, in Ukraine, very famous. The town of one of these is the town of Rabbi Dov Ber, the disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, and that may be more familiar to other people, to many people. And that Mezrich is Mezrichi, Ukraine. There you also have landsleit in Canada. If you could see there, if you look in their Yizkor book, there's landsleit in Canada, but look underneath, and it says there, photographs of landsleit died in Winnipeg, on that line. So it's very important. Like if you say, let's say, I'm looking for Mezrich relatives, and I heard something. Let's say, I heard that we have relatives in Canada. So then people could jump to the conclusion that it's Mezrich Podlaski, the Polish town, because they know in Toronto and Montreal there were landsleit. There were people from the town of Mezrich, but that could lead someone down a rabbit hole if he's from the other Mezrich and really had relatives in Winnipeg. So it's very important to look at these books and gather as much information and take it from there and not be led astray. Here you find that there are records here for that other town as well, the other Mezrich. Kila links. Some towns do not have Yizkor books, such is the case with Tetiev, Ukraine. Now, Tetiev, Ukraine has a Jewish communities page at JewishGen, but you see there's no Yizkor book notation here, but there is Kehila links. And here it tells you, if you don't have to bother reading, but it does give you information and tells you that there are Tetiev Landsmanshaften in New York and in Cleveland. The Tetiever Anshe Avos Achim Anshe Sfard Synagogue this was in Cleveland. This is how it looked originally. This synagogue went through many years of merging and the relocations within Cleveland. Through the Western Reserve Historical Society in Cleveland, I was able to research and take them to up until today. The Oev Tzedek Cedar Sinai congregation, which exists, like I say, today, is the descendant congregation of the Tetiever congregation, and there may be people there that still remember the Tetiever shul. There's a project, a documentary that was in works for Tetiev descendants. I don't know whether it came out, but there was a documentary that should have been made from this town. So you never know what you're going to find, but you have to take if you follow the history of your your town and Landsmanshaft and the synagogues, you may be surprised that even if it's defunct, but there may be a remnant of it today, and it may have morphed into some type of other congregation, but it's still helpful for your history. Now, nearby communities, one doesn't stop at their own community. You have to, as much as it's as important as it is for you to for us to identify our particular town, we also have to be very much familiar by the nearby communities, and actually cast a wide net. Here for Mezrich, you have the towns on the side there which are close to it. And I want to point out too, Lukov, which is 18 miles from Mezrich. And West, okay. It's important to know here, because if you only look for Mezrich, you may not be aware that there's a Lookover Mezrich Society in Los Angeles, and that has a Evo, that has a record group, and that is available at Evo. And the two towns together, the sister societies sister towns bound together to form a society, and that's important to look out for. And for those people who have this is another place to look, is the Jewish Genealogical Society of Illinois. I first want to say that for our case here of Mezrich, we want the cemetery section, and that is there's a database, and they have Landsmanshaftn cemeteries as well as other groups there, and that's another place to find another look of Mezrich Podlasky Cemetery. This is in Waldheim Cemetery in Forest Park in Illinois. But I do want to mention that there is the exception to the rule of we're saying that Landsmanshaftn records are not online. The important exception to that rule is the Chicago Landsmanshaft. Chicago Landsmanshaft does have some Landsmanshaft records online. Very important to go to the Jewish Genealogical Society of Illinois and check out the Sorkin collection, the Landsmanshaft Sorkin collection, and maybe you will find for your town there as well. But it's a great, we're really very, very fortunate to have the Chicago group working on Landsmanshaft records, and I hope that there should be the inspiration for other JGSs to follow suit and get Landsmanshaftn records online. It would be a big help for everyone. Okay, don't forget social media. You may be surprised to find that your town has a social media group. This Lakov, Mezrich, Sedlich, Biala, Radzin, Lositz, Lomazi. This is a group on Facebook, and it's our Mezrich here. Another place to look on the Jewish community page is the virtual shtetl, which leads us to the association, a link to Association of Immigrants of Mezrich Podlasky area in Israel. In Israel, there is an existing, it's on the web, so I assume that they're still in existence, that if you're from this town, there's actually a Landsmanshaft that is current. Now, I must say that most Landsmanshaftn are not. By the at least the United States, by at least the 1980s, that you saw like basically the last of Landsmanshaftn in general, but there are some, and they're still here. And don't forget, if you don't have a Landsmanshaft for your town, but look at JewishGen and look at their research groups. Go to the research divisions and look at the groups within the research divisions. You may be pleasantly surprised if you go ahead and you make connections with the people. You could find people that are also researching your town, and it's the next best thing to a Landsmanshaft. Don't forget about Google. Here we have Big Sonia. This is also a documentary. This is a movie that was made about this survivor. Her name is Sonia. She's from Mesrich. So by putting in Mesrich, and here it is. There's a movie about her. So why do I bring this out? Besides the importance of Holocaust history and everything else, you never know where you're going to find information about your Landsmanshaft, and these are just giving you a little taste of places to look. But I do have more information on my handout. There's a lot more to speak about. This is only introductory, so I have to limit myself. But these are all ideas of how you could explore the rich history of your town and the diaspora from where your town continued. Another place before is the Jewish archive, the JDC archives. It's a very important place to look. As we mentioned before, and I want to get into this if we have a few more minutes, this is a very interesting case of this Velvela Meidenberg from Kosov Lacker, who was from this Kosov Latsker town. And he was, I'll give you a minute to read what the situation was over here. Okay, so you could see here that, I'm sorry, you could see here, you're talking about this man, Sam Rothberg, whose name, it's telling me his original name, Chervanagora. Now that's important in and of itself if you're looking for people. He was the uncle of this boy. You got the mother's name of the boy, Shandel. It says when around the birth of this Velvel, it tells you also information about the Mr. Rothberg and his brothers in. He has two brothers in Argentina. So look what this led to. If you go to Jewish and Family Finder, you will find this name, a very uncommon name. So Chervanagura from Kosov Latsky, which is the town of this that we're talking about. That for sure is a match. And we have from Sadovna, which we shall find out is very close. And from Viskov is also very close to Kosov Latsky. So if you go to Jewish and Community Database and you look at the nearby communities, you will find that Viskov is 29 miles of west of Kosov. But the other town didn't show up. There's it's too small to be listed as a Jewish community, at least according to the JewishGen database. So there's another alternate place to look for smaller places, and that's JewishGen Gazetteer. So if you put Sadovny there, you will find that Sadovny is 12.9 miles west of Kosov. So it didn't make it into the Jewish Communities database, but it did make it into the Gazetteer. So you have to, if you don't find it in one place, look in the other. You also found I found the town of Zochi. It said in that letter, Zochis was where the boy was hidden. This is also a town. Obviously, he was with a Polish peasant, so that wouldn't be suspected to be in a Jewish community, and therefore that makes sense why it's in the Gazetteer, and it's only 2.7 miles southwest of Kosov. So here we have leads to across the globe. We have Australia, Uruguay, Poland. Well, the Poland was the original places, and Argentina. You look at the researchers Look at here. This is also, not only do we have Argentina, the country, but we also have the town of Tucumán. That was the town that was mentioned in that letter. We also here, if you go make sure to take this information and expand upon it by going into the Yad Vashem, pages of testimony. And here you will find also from Kasav, but here you find a Velvel, a person by the same name, obviously it's not the same person, and Chervanagora, and it says the maiden name of his wife is Rothberg. So that tells you something. Now we know why Sam Rothberg changed, so to speak, changed his name from Chervanagora to Rothberg. You see that the families married into each other. This would lead me to believe, only as an assumption, that Sam took the name of his mother, is probably his mother's maiden name instead of his father's name, and that's probably would explain the name change. And here, the submitter is this Alberto Mario Chervanagora in Argentina, who's a grandson. And where is he from? Tucumán. So this is all places to look, to expand your tree, to look for Landsmanshaftn and other people are related, and this is a way of perhaps finding the Landsmanshaft of your choice. Here we find here, just by Googling this Clara Chervanagora, and it gives also the address of Tucumán, Argentina. This we don't have time for. I think I'm going to have to stop here, and we'll take questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Can you see the Q&A?
Q&A. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, first of all, I apologize, but the questions that are so specific to a person's research, I can't take them up with you now. I'm saying that, not that I don't want to answer. I would be happy to, on the handout is my email. Anyone who has specific questions is welcome to ask me privately, but I'm trying to choose questions here that pertain to, in general, for everyone. What is the current status of Landsmanshaftn, as so many of the founders have passed away? Well, the current status is, like we said, most Landsmanshaft do not exist today, but if you can't find a current Landsmanshaft, like we said, there are sometimes you could find descendants of these people, and like we saw, like in this the Tetiev congregation, there could be people that are descendants, grandchildren, or whatever, that still remember and could give you information. Sometimes they may even have records as well. There's someone here with a suggestion. Would it be possible for us to enter our names in Landsmanshaften to perhaps connect with each other? I think that's a great idea. I don't know whether that could be saved. Alex, could people put their information in there? Then we could make like a whole list.
Unfortunately, we don't have the ability, so you'll have to take like a screenshot of an individual message, but I can't change that at this moment.
So, well, if people want to send it to me, to my email, and then we could somehow, I don't know how we would do it. I have to ask Avremi how we would be able to share that with everyone. I think that's a great idea. That was Lois.
And I can also
Thank you.
recommend that everyone make sure that that the towns you're interested in are also on the JewishGen Family Finder.
Okay. people want to disable the chat. I have no control over that. Okay. People say, I'm just, someone here has a question about family circles. Family circles are also, I look at them as, they are mini Landsmanshaften as well. Certainly you should look into family circles but again, there's a lot to get into over here. Someone here asked about, my grandfather was in the workman's circle. Are there membership lists to these organizations available to the public? Yes, there are. There's extensive workman's circle records at Evo, and you could find them in other places as well. So certainly check out Evo. Who exactly are considered Galicians? Well, that's a big, that Galicia is was a it was a province in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So that's the short answer. Oh, this is a good question. A statement, but it's a question. Robin Ugg. My great grandfather was not from Minsk, but was buried in Minsker Old Men's Benevolent. That's a very good point. If a person was buried in a Landsmanshaft plot by a certain name, it generally we consider that that if we didn't have any other information, we might assume that person is from that town, and probably the majority of the people that are interred there are from that town, but it is not exclusively the case. If a person is in that, it could be any reason. Number one, spouse. Like there may have been people, not everyone married someone somewhere from their town, right? Some people marry people from other towns. So if someone is buried there and they want to be buried with their spouse, they're in the town of that spouse, but they are not necessarily from that town. Also, there's some people that bought plots because they didn't have a Landsmanshaft or did not belong to a Landsmanshaft. For example, my grandparents are buried in Old Montefiore Cemetery in New York, and they're buried in the Kedenover plot. Now, they were not members of the Kedenover, but they're my grandmother's my grandfather's sister was married to someone from that town, and since the sister was buried there, they decided to buy plots in that as well. So if you had a society that was willing to sell them plots, they could end up having people there that did not belong to that town. So that's a very important point to remember. Also, when if they had extra places or a society became defunct, many times they merged with societies or sold their land to other entities, and therefore there will be people buried there which don't have anything to do with that Landsmanshaft. But that's why you got it. It's a place to start your research, but it doesn't end there. Is it possible to find out all the services a particular Landsmanshaft offered? Well, it's possible to find out. You have to do the research, though. It won't be like there's no easy way without research. You have to just look all around and find out, know the history. So in general, when we're talking here about Landsmanshaft research, it's important. This is a good time to mention it. It's important to know that a person needs to become the expert on his town. That's really, if you want to get the most out of it, you got to become an expert. You got to be the maven of your town, and so that takes your research. Yeah, are we?
I think we're about, unless you have one more question to answer, we're about out of time.
Let's see. The writing on the gates of societies. Names of people, yes, it's the names of the people. Was there a history? I don't know whether there'd be a history on there, but is information on there. You could probably say the officers and people who belonged. Those were things that you could find. The name of the society, when it was incorporated, those types of information. Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Avram, very much for the informative presentation. We appreciate very much that you joined us today. And we'd like to thank everyone from around the world who has participated in this webinar. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up email with a link to the recording, a brief survey, and a link to sign up for the next week's webinar on the topic of the Czech Torah scroll story from the Holocaust to the diaspora. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.